analysis of Russian and Ukrainian gas transit powers. So, what I will be talking about. First, I'll talk about what is the main source of Russian and Ukrainian gas transit powers. Then I'll move to the relations between Russia and Central Asia on the one hand, and Ukraine and Russia on the other hand, that had been developed for the last 20 years. And then at the very end, I'll explain why both Russia and Ukraine are losing their transit powers. Just a little bit of a framework. The transit power, what do I mean by this? The transit power is an ability of one country to use its pipeline infrastructure in order to influence the decision making of another country, somehow connected to it, either producing countries or importing countries. The complex interdependence theory basically implies that interaction between states, which are interdependent, should actually continue being, should follow their cooperative dynamics. Well, the example of the Russian-Ukrainian gas transit power shows the opposite. I will explain later in my presentation. And the cooperative game and bargaining power, the theory implies that each country, having possessed a particular leverage in the energy transit infrastructure, they try to use it in order to increase their bargaining power and, try to promote the most favorable, the best option for them to get involved into energy export and import relations. The source of Ukrainian gas transit power. Well, if you look at the map, we can see two pipeline networks. That's Bratstvo, which is brotherhood, and the Soyuz, union. Should I translate, or let's leave it this way? So the main goal for the Ukraine was to keep the gas following through its territory to enjoy political and economic leverage, plus financial revenues. I will later explain in the following slide the Ukrainian all the pipeline infrastructure network. But what I wanted to say here in this particular slide is that there are two main reasons and there are two main sources of the Ukrainian gas transit power. The first one is that up until 1992, these pipelines were the only pipelines going from Russia to Europe, meaning that all the natural gas coming from Central Asia to Russia and all the Russian gas in combination with part of the Central Asian gas went to the European market through these two pipeline options. So Ukraine enjoyed 100% transit power over the Russian and Central Asian natural resources. And the second aspect of the Ukrainian gas transit power is that Ukraine was not only the transit power but also the consuming part for the Russian gas. However, Ukraine, like very few countries in the world, could sustain short-term gas supply cuts. And the main reason for that is that Ukraine itself is the natural gas producer, which produces about 20 billion cubic meters of gas annually, and it has the storage capacity of 35 billion cubic meters of gas. Combining them, 55 billion cubic meters of gas, that's almost 80% of the Ukraine's gas consumption per year, which means that if Russia stops supplying gas to Europe, or for some reason Europe decides to cut the gas supply through its territory, it can still sustain itself and meet its energy demand for some time until the negotiation process actually solved the problem. Until 2011, Ukraine transited almost 80% of Russian gas. Now it's 50%, and there is a possibility that it can actually drop down to 0%. I will explain in a moment. The source of Russian gas transit power. This is the main pipeline, which is called Central Asia Center. And that was the only pipeline with 5 branches connecting Central Asian natural resources with Russian market and through Russia to the Europe. Central Asia Central Gas Pipeline, you see going up westward. And then this pipeline was connected to the Soyuz and Bratstvo, and then through this pipeline network, the Central Asian gas reached the Ukrainian market and the European market. So this is a very complicated energy export-import relationships actually, because most of the gas from the Central Asian region was used to supply southern parts of the Russian territory. So physically, Central Asian gas stayed the southern part of the Russian territory. However, without the Central Asian gas, Russia wouldn't be able to fulfill its obligations to the European Union. So if you take the physical gas, yes, the gas actually stayed in Russia, but if you take it and if you look at this from the geopolitical perspective, the Central Asian gas was very important for Russia to keep the Europe under its sphere of influence. The main goal for Russia in this sense was to keep Central Asian countries under its sphere of influence and gain financial revenues. Financial revenues, I'll explain in a moment, and gaining, keeping it in sphere of influence was quite obvious by the Russian attempt to block any natural gas pipeline project that could avoid Russian territory transporting Central Asian gas to the European market. Central Asian Center, 80% of the gas was used to pass through Russian pipeline network. The original design, the capacity of the Central Asia Center pipeline, the pipeline system was 90 billion cubic meters, but now because of the lack of the investment into the maintenance of this pipeline network, the capacity reduced to 50 billion cubic meters. There is also one possibility that the Russian side had been actively promoting several years ago, that was the pre-Caspian gas pipeline network, which was supposed to increase the gas transport, the gas import from Central Asia up to 30 billion cubic meters. However, one of the problems that I see is that according to this project, every country is supposed to cover the cost of building the pipeline itself, and the Central Asian countries, they don't really like to cover the cost of building pipelines. And if you look at the map, the pre-Caspian gas pipeline, 400 kilometers goes through Turkmenistan, and then almost 1,500 kilometers through the territory of Kazakhstan. And neither Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan really wanted to invest a lot of money, billions of dollars, in building this pipeline. So the gas flow from Central Asia to Russia and through Russia is decreasing year by year. So frequent short-term gas supply cuts. As I explained at the very beginning, the Ukrainian gas transit power, the Ukraine gas transit potential was a very powerful tool to prevent long-term gas supply cuts, at least until recently. However, the short-term gas supply cuts and the disruptions, they actually took place many times throughout the history of the independent Russia and Ukraine. So if you look at the map on the left, it shows how many pipelines, small and the big pipeline networks, are actually passing and moving the Russian gas to the European market. So you see how important Ukraine is for Russia, at least was. And still we have the problem of gas supply cuts. The first major gas supply problem and the gas crisis that they called it at that time, occurred in 1993 when Russia cut 25% of the Ukrainian gas supply as an ultimatum to surrender the nuclear arsenal. So the gas leverage and the energy leverage was used as the political kind of tool. And then in 1995, Russia raised this issue again, kind of initiating the gas crisis and the gas problems, because they wanted the Ukraine to join the CIS customs union. So again, energy was used for the political purposes. However, even though according to some estimates, in between 1991 and 2005, there were more than 50 gas supply cuts, and the problems between Russia and Ukraine, they were never really serious, in the sense that the gas supply cuts were never, the gas supply was never stopped completely. And the first case when the gas supply from Russia through Ukraine to Europe was cut completely took place in 2006 for 4 days because of the gas pricing issue and the debt that the Ukraine companies own Russia. 4 days, 4 days again somehow affected the Ukrainian and the European countries' economy, because, well, it's not shown here in this presentation, but some of the Eastern European countries, they, for almost 100%, are dependent on the Russian gas, like Hungary, for example, and that's why even 4 days gas supply cuts and the disruptions, they affected the economy of those countries, but not that seriously. In 2009, the gas supply cuts and the disruptions, they lasted longer, for 14 days, and affected 18 European countries. Most of the European countries, they have their gas storages, but again, taking the natural gas from the storage, this is a little bit complicated technical aspect, because, for example, in the case of Ukraine, most of the gas strategically gas storages, they are located in the western part of the country. So when the Russia cuts gas supply to Ukraine, or Ukraine stops passing the Russian gas, then Ukraine will have, has to reverse the gas supply flow, meaning that energy consuming regions of Ukraine, they are located in the eastern part, gas storages in the western part, so the gas supply flow should go in reverse direction from the west to the east. It will take time to change the direction and reverse the gas supply flow. Same works for the European countries. Once they open their storages, it takes time, and it's very difficult and sometimes expensive to put it all back when the conflict ends. So that's why even 14 days gas supply cut actually affected the European countries. And now we observe again the third major gas supply and the gas prices in the region in relations between Russia, Ukraine and the European countries in 2014. And it's been already 6 months since the last Russian gas passed through the Ukrainian gas infrastructure to the European countries. And yes, we checked today, even though the agreement was signed in October, in late October, it's expected that today actually the Russian gas supply should actually,
They already started to get gas on Tuesday, I suppose.
On Tuesday?
On Tuesday.
Really? It says December allowance.
It was the previous information. The last one started to get gas from Russia on Tuesday.
Oh, they started getting receiving receiving gas from Russia on Tuesday, but they didn't know it, and they releasing the information. Okay, whatever. Initially, it was supposed that the supply should be restored on December 8th. That should be the Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but according to some other sources, it's today.
Yeah, it's close apparently.
At full?
Well, the first day today, 43 million cubic meters already delivered.
Today. What about December 8th?
Let us check
Yes.
after your presentation.
Yeah, because that's the information that I have. That they started receiving. So, Ukraine is losing its transit power. Why Ukraine is losing its transit power? Ukraine was the only transit country for the Russian gas going to Europe up until 1990s. So we can see that the whole pipeline system, well, not the whole, on this map, only the Soyuz and Druzhba, these pipeline networks that I showed you at the very beginning, well, these pipelines were established in 1960s, 70s and 80s, increasing their capacities.
But Druzhba is oil, right?
Oil and gas, gas and oil.
Both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My apologies.
You meant brotherhood.
Да, brotherhood, дружба. Братство.
Yes.
Sorry, дружба. Yeah. Bratstvo, the brotherhood, and the Soyuz gas pipelines. So they were built in 1960s, and the capacity had been increasing throughout the 70s and 80s. In 2005, 50% of the gas from and through Russia went to the European countries. However, in 2013, we can see the the dynamics going down to 30%. Until 1990s, as I said, Ukraine was the only gas transit country for the whole Russian and the Central Asian gas to the European countries. However, because of the conflicts and the frequent short gas supply cuts and disagreements, Russia decided to somehow diversify its dependence on the Ukrainian gas transit infrastructure and decided to build Yamal-1, the pipeline network going through Belarus territory to the European countries, with the capacity of 28 billion cubic meters, which is quite a lot. Not significant, but quite a lot. This reduced the Ukrainian gas transit power down to 80%, because now, at that time, not all the gas the gas passed through the Ukrainian territory, but also through the Belarus. But it was not enough, apparently, and the gas prices of 2006 and 2009 proved this. Having anticipated that, I think Russia also decided to invest in the Nord Stream pipeline infrastructure, which was supposed to avoid any transit country and directly connect the Russian gas reserves with the European ones. And if you look at the capacity of 55 billion cubic meters in combination with 25 billion cubic meters of Yamal-1 pipeline, now only 50% of the Russian gas is going through the territory of Ukraine, which means that the Ukrainian gas transit power decreased down to 50%, 50-50, half. Now if Ukraine decides to lock down the Russian gas and the pipeline infrastructure, the Russian economy will not suffer that much in comparison to the case 20 years ago. So, and again, everyone was talking about the South Stream. South Stream pipeline network is another pipeline network which was supposed to go through the Black Sea, beneath the Black Sea, connecting the Russian natural resources with the European market, directly avoiding any transit country. Which means that, taking into account the capacity of the South Stream pipeline, which is more than 60 billion cubic meters, in combination with other two, then there will be no need for the Ukrainian gas pipeline networks at all. Because with the current level of gas export from Russia to the European Union, they would have managed it to supply European countries avoiding Ukraine. So in this case, Ukraine would have lost completely its gas transit power. However, the South Stream pipeline is still the project, even though the agreement had been signed and there is money allocated by the Russian side and the European countries. Now we see that the problems regarding the sanctions and the Bulgaria and the European Union and the Russia. So overall, having all this mix, we now see that Russia decided to withdraw from the South Stream pipeline network infrastructure and propose Turkey to take over and build the pipeline through the Turkish territory, connecting the European countries, Well, I don't know how safe is this option geopolitically, because again, Russia is trying to avoid the transit country. Whether Russia is trying to avoid Ukraine or the transit country, this is a very important question. Because if Russia is trying to avoid Ukraine, just Ukraine, then Turkey, Black Sea doesn't really matter. If Russia wants to avoid the transit country, which has the capacity to block the Russian gas supply flow to the European countries, then the Turkey may turn to be another problem in the future for Russia. So because the transit countries, they legally they are not allowed to block, yes, but physically they can do this, and that's the problem. So in this case, either South Stream or the pipeline going through Turkey to the European countries, it doesn't really matter, because the capacity of these two projects is almost the same, meaning that the Ukraine will lose its gas transit power completely. By the way, the Ukrainian proposal, that took a couple of years ago, the Ukraine proposed to build the White Stream pipeline to transport Central Asian gas, avoiding Russia, but via Ukraine. I don't know. I think there isn't this pipeline project, even as planned one, depicted in this picture. But anyway, so the Ukraine proposed to react to the Russian influence and the Russian policy against Ukraine by proposing Europe to cover the cost of building the White Stream pipeline connecting Central Asian energy resources, mainly Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan in natural gas, to the European countries through the Ukrainian territory, avoiding Russia and Turkey. But I think that's a real pipe dream. Well, in case of the Central Asia and Russia energy relations, if the Russia-Ukraine gas transit relations, they were characterized as they were lots of short-term gas supply cuts, but never a long one until 2014. In case of the Central Asia Russia gas supply relations, they were stable for many years, up until 2008 actually. However, the relationships, they were not always fair towards the Central Asian gas producers and exporters. The gas export-import relations between Central Asian producers and the Russia took the form of barter for almost 15 years, from the time when they received the independence up until 2004. Well, then Central Asian countries, they actually started arguing, saying that we don't really need the goods, we need the hard currency, we need the money. So Russia introduced the pricing policy for the Central Asian natural gas. In 2000, however, as I said, the relationships, they were not fair towards the Central Asian countries, because in 2006, Gazprom paid $100 per 1,000 cubic meters of Turkmen gas and resold it for $230 per 1,000 cubic meters to Rosukreenergo, which then resold it to Ukraine for 95%. And here we see the political aspect, not really the economic aspect of energy export-import relations, but to Europe for $250 per 1,000 cubic meters. Buying from Central Asia from Turkmenistan for 100, selling to Europe for 250, and you can see $150 plus extra that the Russia gained. And since the Central Asia Center pipeline was the only, those 5 pipeline branches were the only energy export routes controlled by Russia, the Central Asian countries, they really had very little to say against it. Then in 2007, the presidents of Turkmenistan and the presidents of Kazakhstan, they were active in considering the options to diversify Central Asian dependence on Russia. So they started saying that they now want to trade with European countries directly and use Russia only as a transit country, to pay Russia the transit fee, and that's it, but sign all the contracts with the European customers directly. To which Russia responded saying that we will not allow you to sign direct contracts with the European customers. However, we'll increase the price for the natural gas up to the European price level, which was a really good deal, acceptable for the Central Asian countries. Russia in 2008 signed a contract with Turkmenistan. Well, Turkmenistan is the main gas supplier from the Central Asian region. Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, they produce almost the same amount of natural gas, but Uzbekistan is also one of the biggest consumer of natural gas. So basically Uzbekistan consumes what it produces, and Turkmenistan exports most of the production. In 2008, Turkmenistan and Russia signed the contract, according to which Russia was supposed to buy 50 billion cubic meters of gas, or Turkmenistan was supposed to supply 50 billion cubic meters of gas. It doesn't really matter, because the contract was signed on a take or pay basis, which means that it doesn't really matter if Russia imports the Turkmen gas or not. If Turkmenistan is sending this gas, then Russia has to pay for it. Russia agreed to pay $350 per 1,000 cubic meters of the Turkmenistani gas. So very good deal at that time. But however, because of the conflict, because of the Russia-Ukraine gas crisis, Russia was no longer able to re-export Central Asian gas, because gas was not simply going through the Ukrainian territory, and Russia doesn't really have significant gas storage capacities. Then this whole situation resulted in the gas explosion on one of the pipelines of the Central Asia Center pipeline network. And the story was that Turkmenistan was sending its gas. Russia didn't make an official statement that it stopped buying Turkmen gas, but slowly reduced the gas flow. The pipeline's 30 years old, and because of the high pressure, the explosion happened. And then they started arguing who is going to take over the explosion and the reconstruction part. Technically, this pipeline could have been restored for a couple of weeks. However, it took almost 9 months, and for almost 9 months, and here if you look at the Turkmenistan production and the consumption, but look at the production, you see the significant drop in the production. It's not because the Turkmenistan suddenly lost the production capacity, or there was no gas anymore. The Turkmenistan reduced the production because it could no longer export to any country. The only one was Russia, and Russia is not buying it. So Turkmenistan was actually in a very difficult situation, and China came along and helped Turkmenistan by offering 2 billion euros. Well, it was grant and then loans, and then again grants and then loans. But anyway, China stepped in and proposed to build the China-Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, China gas pipeline network. Russia couldn't say anything against it because, well, now Russia was not buying the Turkmen gas, and the Central Asian countries are very much dependent on export of their natural resources. If you look at the statistics, Central Asian gas at the Russian border accounted for 2.3 billion cubic meters in 1998, 38 billion cubic meters in 2000, 63 billion cubic meters in 2006, and only, I should say, less than 20 billion cubic meters in 2012, and the amount is decreasing, meaning that now Russia is losing its transit power for the Central Asian countries, because Central Asian natural gas exports works towards the Chinese direction. And it will take, well, I think that's my estimates, up to 7 years just to comply the requirements, to fulfill their obligations to meet the energy export capacity to China. Here we go. Central Asian Center, main pipeline network, and the Bukhara Ural, also one of the pipeline networks from Uzbekistan to Russia. in 2007, 60 billion cubic meters of gas, well, which is almost 80% of the total export from the Central Asian region, went to Russia and through Russia to the European countries, and the main contributor was Turkmenistan, with almost 50 billion cubic meters of gas, and Uzbekistan with 10 billion cubic meters of gas. And Turkmenistan exported 42 billion cubic meters of natural gas in 2012, out of which 52% went to China. And still, well, Turkmenistan as well as Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, they are trying to increase their export capacity, but most of the gas is going towards the Chinese direction, because according to the latest agreement that had been signed between Central Asian natural gas exporters and China, now they are obliged to supply up to 80 billion cubic meters of gas to China. How are they going to meet the external demand? It's a very difficult question. Russia still succeeds to block the European projects because the Europe and the influence over Europe is an important issue for the Russian Federation, and they use their gas power as gas exporters to influence the European countries. But they couldn't prevent China entering the Central Asian gas market.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
I have a question. Can you go back once?
One more time.
No, this is fine. Just looking at the numbers, because it says that 2007, Turkmenistan exported 48.1 billion cubic meters to Russia alone. Then,
To answer Russia.
yes, to and through Russia, in that direction. And then 5 years later, the overall export of Turkmenistan in all directions is 42.
Yes.
So it's decreasing.
Yes. Well, it's not decreasing. The problem is that in 2012 Russia is not buying Turkmenistan gas
Still.
in the same amount. No,
Okay.
still not buying. Still not buying the Turkmenistani gas. And the Turkmenistan-China pipeline started operating in 2011, meaning that in 2012 the capacity of this Chinese pipeline was still low. I mean, now in 2014 they have succeeded to increase it somehow.
But where do the 24% to Russia come from then?
From Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan.
Uh,
Russia?
No, is the pipeline now operating after the?
Yes, of course,
Okay.
it is operating.
But
It
they,
It took
10, almost, it's 10, yeah,
what
10 million cubic meters.
billion cubic meters. Yeah, Turkmenistan is exporting. Well, Russia is now importing from Central Asia in total less than 20 billion cubic meters.
okay.
That's the Turkmenistani gas, that's the Uzbekistani gas, and very little amount of Kazakhstani gas as well. So less than 20 billion cubic meters. I have read in some news papers saying that the Gazprom actually announced that starting from 2015 they are considering to stop buying Central Asian gas at all because of the problems with Ukraine, so Russia doesn't really need Central Asian gas at this moment.
And the 22% to Iran are the Trans-Caspian pipeline.
No Trans-Caspian
Doesn't
pipeline
exist
doesn't
yet.
really exist.
So how do they
From Turkmenistan to Iran,
directly?
they have a
They
pipeline.
have no pipeline because there was
Yes.
nothing in there.
Yes, there is a pipeline from Turkmenistan to Iran with the capacity of 8 billion cubic meters, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
and they actually have two. Yeah, they
8
have
and
two.
20, but they...
12. They have 8 and 12.
And totally it will be
Totally
20,
it will be 20,
Yeah.
but Turkmenistan never supplied 20 billion cubic meters of gas to Iran. And actually, Iran also said that Iran wants to stop buying Turkmen gas at all. I mean, yes, so then all Turkmen gas will go to the Chinese direction, which means that Turkmenistan traded its dependence on Russia to China. So how reliable China would be as the partner, as the importing country, is a difficult question, but what encourages the Turkmen side is the fact that the Russia needed Turkmen gas to fulfill its obligations to Europe. Russia didn't really need the Turkmen and Uzbek gas to meet its own energy demands. But in case of China, China needs Central Asian energy resources to meet its own energy needs. And unless Chinese energy demand starts decreasing, China will increase their import from Central Asia and will make sure that the import actually goes. But again, the problem is that Russia inherited pipeline infrastructure. Russia didn't invest money in building the pipelines, and building pipelines is really expensive. In case of China, China for almost 90-95% covered the cost of building Turkmenistan-China pipeline, meaning that now China wants to get back their investments. And if you look at the gas price from Turkmenistan to China, 1,000 cubic meters, China is buying 1,000 cubic meters of Turkmen gas for $150. And this is half the price that the European countries are paying actually. So Europe remains the most lucrative, let's say, market for the Central Asian energy resources. But we have the problem of Russia being a transit country. And we have the problem of Russia and Ukraine being double transit country for the Central Asian energy resources. And the gas pipeline, Trans-Caspian gas pipeline, avoiding both Russia and Ukraine might aid some perspectives to this, but again, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 other transit countries for the Central Asian energy resources to the European countries. And unless the pipeline is built, the transit countries, the potential transit countries, they are really good. They try to position themselves as a really good transit countries. But once the pipeline is built and you cannot change this pipeline very easily, they start pursuing political and some other goals and interests. To conclude, after disintegration of the Soviet Union, both Russia and Ukraine inherited gas transit infrastructure, which gave them certain leverage. The complex interdependence with some ups and downs, as I said, between Russia and Ukraine overall guaranteed the security from long-term gas supply cuts, but could not prevent the short-term gas supply disruptions. Both Russia and Ukraine used their advantageous position to bargain for the best price for natural gas, and we see the $95 that the Ukraine paid for the Russian gas against $250 that the European customers were paying. And in case of Central Asia and Russia relations, we also remember $100 that the Russia bought from Central Asia and sold it for $250, making lots of money out of it. And the political interests sometimes prevail the economic ones, and if the crisis of 2006 and 2009, both Russia and Ukraine, they used their energy leverage to influence the political kind of environment, the politics. I think in 2014, that's actually the politics that determined the long-term gas supply cuts in the region. Well, however, current state of gas supply relations indicates that they are losing their transit power. And as I said, in the case of Russia and Ukraine, if Russia succeeds to build either South Stream pipeline network or realize its project building pipelines through the Turkey to the European countries, then the Ukraine will lose its transit power completely. However, according to different projections, the demand for natural gas in the European Union is going to increase, and it will increase up to 750 something billion cubic meters by 2030. And if we take this into consideration, then even if Russia builds the South Stream or the pipelines through the Turkey, the increasing gas demand will still require additional gas moving from Russia to Europe, and then they will probably restore the gas supplies through Ukraine. I think, maybe. In case of Central Asia, Russia gas transit relations, that was basically as a spillover effect of the Russia-Ukrainian gas crisis, and increasing interest by other customers which are willing to pay and build the pipelines and buy the Central Asian gas is affecting the Russian gas transit power. For Ukraine, as I said, if Russia succeeds to build this alternative pipeline, then it will lose its bargaining power and the transit power. For Russia, it should be very careful in pushing Central Asian states to restore gas supplies. Europe is increasing the demand, Russia is potential supplier, but whether Russia can supply and meet the increasing demand is the big question. Then Russia will probably remember about the contract signed in 2008 that Turkmenistan is obliged to supply 50 billion cubic meters of gas, and then starts negotiation with Central Asian countries about increasing the gas import. This may negatively affect the overall energy export-import relations and the whole energy security in Central Asia, in the sense that both China and Russia will probably be competing for the Central Asian energy resources. And the problem is that we do possess lots of natural resources beneath the ground, but they really worth little unless they are extracted and transported. And the production capacity of the Central Asian countries, well, I should say there wasn't a boom in natural gas production in Central Asia, but they are signing lots of agreements, taking obligations to supply lots of gas to other customers. Whether they can physically do this or not is also a big question. And thank you very much for your attention.